say that we'll take on-topic questions now. Thank you.
Sorry. Don't worry, we'll have off-topic too. All right, we'll start with some on-topic questions, though. Hi,
what's the capacity for how many kids this facility will be able to accommodate?
Sorry, could you say that just one more time?
Sure. Around the NBC, how many kids are this facility able to accommodate with
This will be able to accommodate 40 children, and the applications will begin shortly. They will be available to every employee who works at this site, as well as every DCAS employee across the city.
Jobs for the employees who will staff it?
Yes, this will also have a vendor that is contracted to provide this service. But also, as Executive Director of DC 37, Henry Garrido, mentioned, we're also seeing so many DCAS workers making this a possibility today.
Hey, Mr. Mayor,
Hey, how's it going?
So what is
Where
the
were
cost?
you in the inner circle?
Yeah,
You were there?
we had our whole table. Oh,
I mean on the stage.
no.
Miss Rachel is over here.
I know.
Gail Brewer's over there.
How much is this contract specifically going to go out for? What do you expect that to be? And is this any different than what Eric Adams had announced last October? Is there anything changed since then?
There are a few things. First change is that we're expanding eligibility to include everyone who works within this building. Prior, it had only been eligible for DCAS employees to be able to apply. Secondly, the prior administration had only put capital funding towards this, no actual operating funding towards the running of this site. We are going to be putting that funding into the executive budget. We anticipate that will be around $2.3 million.
And that's just for this?
That's for this site. Yes, for this site. Yes.
And I guess building on Craig's question, I know it was announced a pilot program in October. When do you anticipate expanding that to DCAS-run facilities, even city-run facilities, beyond here in other boroughs? Or are you waiting to see the success here before you expand that?
We are pursuing every possible avenue to make it easier to have kids and raise those kids here in the city, especially when we're talking about for so many of the workers who keep this city running. And so this is something that we're pursuing for children from 6 weeks to 3 years. I'm sorry. Alongside pursuing universal 2K for every single 2-year-old by the end of 4 years. And I appreciate, also what Henry was saying earlier, which is it's part of a long-standing advocacy we've also seen from the champions of city workers across the city, and we look forward to seeing the results of this and uncovering every potential avenue to build on it.
Other on-topic questions? Yeah, go ahead, Emma.
Hi, Mr. Mayor.
Hi, Emma. How are you?
My colleagues recently reported that in addition to the $1.7 billion in savings that you've identified, that you're expecting to save another $1.3 billion with the delayed class size mandate and the deal to not fully implement the city bus expansion. And we were wondering, where else do you plan to identify potential cuts in savings, given that the governor appears to want those savings and doesn't appear inclined to raise income taxes?
So we directed every city agency and department to find $1.7 billion in savings over 2 fiscal years. And we made this directive to them with a focus on efficiency, on rooting out any instance of fraud or waste. Now, we will not rest even after we hit that $1.7 billion, because wherever there is an example in inefficiency, it's an opportunity for city government to rise to meet the moment. However, we will not use the fiscal crisis as a justification to cut the very kinds of services that New Yorkers rely on. That is what New Yorkers are looking to us for, to have a responsible stewardship of the city's fiscal health while continuing to provide those essential services. That's what we anticipate. That is exactly what we will be doing. And as we continue these budget negotiations, it will always be the focus of what we do.
We'll take off-topic questions as well. Julia, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, wanted to ask you about municipal madness.
Very good to see you.
Yes, thank you. How did you decide on what issues and in those particular neighborhoods? Because I saw them on the chart. And when people are voting, Sunset Park, let's say, water fountains, how did you decide that?
These were a number of suggestions that were put forward by our city agencies. The beauty of this bracket is that every suggestion wins, in that even if it doesn't win its bracket, it will still be fixed. The competition is just which one I'm going to be there to fix. And that is something that we've been excited to see so many New Yorkers engage in this process, because our point that we're making to New Yorkers is that we have to be able to focus on the biggest expenses in their lives, things like childcare, and also the kinds of annoyances that are too often overlooked when it comes to living in the city.
Are you going to do Final Fours or just the winner?
Just the winner. Yeah.
Hi, Mayor. Can you give us...
Attorney General, how are you?
Yes, it's I. Respect. On a more serious note. Can you get so funny, switching from like something like... can you give us a sense of when you were looped in about the NYPD foiling the assassination plot against Nerdeen Kiswani? Were you given an up-to-date info as it unfolded? And separately, like, she's made criticisms. She said that you betrayed the Palestinian cause since being elected. Like, what do you make of that?
I think any New Yorker is, they have the right to critique, and also we need to protect them from any threat of political violence. That is the truth for Nerdeen and for anyone who calls this city home. I was informed by the NYPD of this attempted plot on Friday. I am thankful for their and the FBI's efforts to ensure that this plot, which could have endangered Nerdeen's life as well as those of other New Yorkers, was thwarted. And I want to be very clear that we do not tolerate any kind of violent extremism in this city. No one should face violence for their political beliefs or for their advocacy. And I'm relieved that Nerdeen is safe.
Mr. Mayor, Bruce Blakeman, as you know, is running for governor. He's having a press conference on the steps of City Hall today to announce his affordability agenda and to attack your tax policies. He's specifically upset about the policy that you've announced about cutting the amount of money people could leave in their estates and how much they pay the states in taxes. I wonder if you could talk about why you want that policy and why it's important for the state, and how you feel about him going to City Hall to try to attack you and make you part of his governor's campaign.
I'm not sure quite what to say about Bruce Blakeman. What I can tell you is the proposal that he might be focusing on is one that's often been mischaracterized. What we've put our support behind as part of a menu of options to raise revenues to bridge the city's fiscal deficit is an estate tax that would also have an exemption of an additional $1.75 million when it comes to primary residences. So we've seen Blakeman and others try and characterize this as if it would impact middle-class homeowners, when the truth of it is that it wouldn't. And look, we're talking about a man who espouses so much of what has diminished New Yorkers' faith in politics across the city and across the state. Someone who looks at what ICE is doing and thinks it's exactly what the city needs to see. We are all here representing different levels of government, advocacy, organized labor, commissioners, and yet I would dare to say amidst all of that, we agree on the fact that what New Yorkers deserve is dignity, safety, and not having to deal with elected representatives who are looking to determine which one of us belongs and which one of us should be deported. And it's no surprise to me that he's coming all the way to City Hall to talk about affordability, because we're one of the only places that is taking affordability seriously. In Nassau County, his focus is on how to round up as many people as possible and send them as far away as he can.
Feel about the fact that he's making you a focal point of his campaign to try to defeat Kathy Hochul?
You know, I think there have been a lot of attempts to make us the focal point, and a lot of times it also spreads some of the message of what we're talking about. And I'll welcome the opportunity.
Hi, Mr. Mayor.
Hi, Melissa. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. What do you say to Republicans or others like David Patterson who seem to think that your Inner Circle skit with Curtis Sliwa proves that you were engaged in some kind of conspiracy?
Great skit. Thank you very much. I think the only conspiracy that's on offer is two people who have a sense of humor and are willing to poke fun at themselves. And, you know, we reached out to Curtis and asked him if he'd be willing to be a part of a sketch where he played a cat allergist doctor. And we shot that sketch. And I think that what New Yorkers want to see is a city where we can vehemently disagree with each other and also still know that we live in the same city. And a sense of humor, I think, is a prerequisite to being a New Yorker. And all of these people who can't distinguish between a sketch and reality, I think it shows some of the problems they're having with their politics.
Yeah, last question, Laura. The state budget deadline is tomorrow. Hi, Mr. Mayor. Safe to assume, I think, that they're not going to hit that deadline and have a deal by then. But do you think it's reasonable to assume that you're going to get more in direct aid from the state, given the state's budget surplus, without any sort of like like as a one-shot budget addition.
We're encouraged by the nature of the negotiations and the conversations we're having with the governor and with state legislative leaders. And what has been heartening is a recognition of the fact that we came into office looking at a $12 billion fiscal deficit. And over the time with the accounting for Wall Street bonuses and revenues and savings, as well as with $1.6 billion in commitments from the state, we were able to reduce that to $5.4 billion. That is still a significant fiscal deficit that is one that we want to meet in partnership with our partners at the state. And we've seen an understanding of the scale of what this deficit is, as well as the many different options the state has of providing a structural solution to a structural crisis.
Do you think it's possible that the total deficit gets closed without any of the recurring revenue-raising proposals that you've backed?
So I'll lay it out a little bit. We inherited this crisis. The importance of stating that out loud is that it's not a result of spending decisions we've made over the last 3 months. This is a result of under-budgeting and financial mismanagement that preceded our administration. If we seek to meet this kind of a deficit with just one-time funding, then it will mean that in a year from now, we will all return with the same issue in front of us. That's why we talk about this both being a structural crisis, needing structural solutions. And I think structural solutions are the shifting of the cost burdens we've seen over the last decade, going from the state to the city back to a fairer place, what we've talked about as ending the drain, and a taxing of the wealthiest New Yorkers and the most profitable corporations that little bit more, so that we can afford to make a city where each and every New Yorker can actually keep calling it its home.
Thank you guys so much.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I
Thank you all
ask
so much.
about the
Thank you, guys.
protest